Hey guys, it's Vampire Mike from Sega CD Universe. So I wanted to do a quick response video to my good buddy Heath over at Serial at Midnight and my buddy Travis over at Retro Alliance Gaming. They did some great videos about slasher icons and some of their favorite horror films, and I just wanted to kind of chime in. So I've talked about these videos and these movies in the past, but I did want to talk about them again, and I'm sure there might be a new one or two in there that some people don't realize have risen in my ranks. So these are my favorite horror films. There's I think 8 of them here, so let's get into it, and I'll just talk about each of them a little bit and why I like them. So the first one, which I don't know if I'd fully consider like a horror movie, but it is in the horror genre. It meets all the check boxes, but it's not scary, and that is The Lost Boys. If anyone's been following this channel for any length of time, you will know this is one of my favorite movies since I've been a kid, and it has Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, Kiefer Sutherland, Jason Patric, Jamie Gertz, who's one of my first crushes. So it has all the cast of characters that I really like. I'm a huge Corey Haim fan. I've since followed on with him to Prayer of the Roller Boys and Fast Getaway and License to Drive and Demolition High and New Terminal Hotel and all the other movies he's been in, Backlot Murders, and Corey Feldman with stuff like Voodoo, and Voodoo's actually a pretty good kind of horror, cheesy horror movie, but he's done a lot of pretty good stuff as well afterwards. But I love The Lost Boys. It's about a family moving from, I want to say it's like Arizona or New Mexico, I can't remember where, to California. The older brother, Jason Patric, starts to get mixed in with this crowd and things start getting a little hairy. He realizes that they're vampires, spoiler alert from a movie from 1987, and that's kind of where the movie goes from there. But great one-liners, some great makeup, great cast, has that 80s cheese, excellent soundtrack, probably, definitely my favorite soundtrack of all time. So check out The Lost Boys if you haven't seen it, though I would assume most of you have, especially if you're in my age range. Let's see here. One of my other favorite films in the horror genre is Suspiria. This is a movie by Dario Argento. So at my old job, I had this girl who worked down the hall from me, and we were talking horror movies in our little group, and she told me, "Did you ever see Suspiria?" And she proceeded to bring it in, you know, the next day or the next week and loan me it, and I really loved it. It's about this girl who goes to a ballet school in, I want to say it's France, though it could be Italy, but I think it's France, and all this weird stuff starts happening. There's like people dying, there's like bugs in one of the rooms that are coming into the building, people are getting sick, there's like all this strange stuff, and it turns into this story where you're like, oh, now I see what's happening, and there's kind of more behind this school than meets the eye. I don't want to give away too much. It is by Dario Argento, who, this is probably his most famous film. I've seen his other work. I couldn't really get into the rest of it, though it all has a similar 70s horror sort of cheese vibe to it. But this is my favorite of his. I think it's his best by far. So check out Suspiria if you haven't. I would like to tell you what it's about, but I don't want to say too much. But it's a cool flick, and it emanates that 70s feeling. Another one of my favorite movies. I was at she's older now, but she was a kid at this point. My mom's best friend's daughter was getting, I want to say graduating from something or confirmed or something, and we had just finished up and they went out somewhere, and her father and I are friends. He's the one who trades movies with me sometimes, and he said, "Have you ever seen The Wicker Man?" And I said, "No," and he proceeded to put on The Wicker Man, and I was enamored. This is a great slow burn mystery type horror film, with Edward Woodward. Christopher Lee plays a great part, Ingrid Pitt plays a great part, and oof, Britt Eklund, boy. So there's these people, or this person that's missing on this little remote island in, it's either England or Scotland, excuse me, I don't remember, and this detective, who is played by Edward Woodward, comes from like the mainland to try and figure out where's this missing girl, what's going on. The movie's really weird. The characters are all very strange. You don't know what's going on with them. There's a lot of like Wiccan and pagan type symbology and references. things about reproduction and sex, but it's really weird, it's really slow, it's interesting, and by the end of the film you're like, oh my god, no, this isn't going to happen, and it does, and it's just crazy. It's a great movie. This is a great classic horror movie. If you don't mind slow movies, check this out. It's excellent. Another one of my favorites is Sleepaway Camp. So this has 5 films. 2 and 3 are really good, but they're goofy. 4 is a piece of garbage that they just took snippets from other Sleepaway Camp films and tried to make a film. And 5 is cheesy but pretty good. But this by far is the best one. And it's about this young girl and her brother who get into a boating accident. The brother dies, and she gets taken in by her aunt, and the aunt's kid is a boy, and they take in the daughter, and the son and the niece go to sleepaway camp, and people start getting killed, and all these weird things start happening. It's very cheesy, great one-liners, great special effects, and it starts to unravel who the killer is and what's going on at sleepaway camp, and the ending is just phenomenal. I mean, it's an ending I did not see coming. Your jaw kind of drops and you get kind of creeped out. It's great. 2 and 3, you know, since you already know what the ending is in 1, it just kind of goes off with that character and that spin-off, and it's cheesy, but 1 is just excellent. This is like a great, great movie. My friend Neil had come over a couple of years ago, and he would bring just a stack of films, and he'd say, have you ever seen, you know, Basket Case or Sleepaway Camp or this or that? And I, Madman, and he pulled this one out and we watched it, and I just loved it. This is a great, great movie. So one of my other favorites, or 2 other favorites technically, that I've spoken about before and you've probably heard me talk about is The Exorcist. I think the first Exorcist is probably the best horror film I've ever seen. It is creepy and weird. It's about this girl getting possessed by a demon. There's weird stuff in the background. On set, some of the people were getting sick and dying during the filming. It's based loosely off this girl who had, I believe, epilepsy and was having seizures back in like I think it was the 50s or 60s. The special effects are amazing for the time. The characters are all like, the movie just feels strange. It makes you feel weird when you watch it. I know some people think The Exorcist is overrated. I think it's just awesome. So The Exorcist is definitely one of my favorite horror films, hands down. But I would also like to recommend The Exorcist 3, which is also one of my favorite horror films. 2 pretty much sucked, and 4 and 5 are sort of the same film but cut differently, so they're different films. Those are pretty good. They're interesting enough, but 3 is where it's at. 3 might even top 1 for me a little bit. 3 is a detective story about I think it's George C. Scott or George Scott, who played General Patton. He is trying to figure out what's happening with these murders. There's, again, the demonic possession angle going on. It's creepy. There's some interesting kills. And Brad Dourif is in it from Chucky, from the Chucky films. And it's just a great movie. Exorcist 3 is awesome. If you haven't seen, I would also recommend The Ninth Configuration. So William Peter Blatty had, I think, written, I don't know if he directed, or maybe he directed and didn't write, I don't remember, The Exorcist. He didn't do 2, and 2 was terrible. Then he did 3, but as a pseudo-sequel to 1, with sort of, it's not really a sequel, it's sort of a spin-off, is The Ninth Configuration, which is about these ex-military vets that live in this castle and are all sort of have mental issues, and it's sort of like a dark comedy. It's not really scary, but it's an interesting slow burn dark comedy with some horror or darker elements. But in the original Exorcist, when Reagan says, "You're going to die up there," and she's talking to the astronaut, this movie is about the Ninth Configuration. It's about that astronaut and him being in this mental institution. So check out that movie if you haven't seen it, if you love the other Exorcist films. But it's not one of my favorites. It's an acquired taste, but it's still really good. But Exorcist 1 and 3, amazing. One of my other favorite films that I've spoken about before is Jacob's Ladder. If you like things like Silent Hill took a lot from this movie. It's about a war vet who has like PTSD, and he has some kind of mental issues, some kind of psychosis, you think, and he's seeing all these demons and weird things. His chiropractor is played by Danny Aiello, who plays like a guardian angel type figure, which is funny to me because I go to chiropractors and I always kind of see them in that light where they're working with, you know, your body parts that are still there. They're not trying to push drugs on you, and they're trying to heal you in other, you know, ways with what you have. But very creepy, weird film. It does have some like 80s sort of not cheese to it, but feeling to it. It stars Tim Robbins, and as I said, Danny Aiello. It's just really creepy. So he's an ex-vet, and he's a mailman, and he's trying to kind of come to terms with his problems. I believe him and his wife had divorced, and his son died, so he's trying to come to terms with that. And he starts seeing all this crazy stuff. If you like Silent Hill, either the movie or the games, check out Jacob's Ladder. And finally, this sort of is not horror, but sort of is. It's like a cyberpunk sci-fi horror film, and that's Videodrome. This is one of my favorite movies. It's excellent. It's by David Cronenberg, who has now moved on to things like Eastern Promises and History of Violence. But I love this case. It looks like a beta tape. I think it's really cool. This stars James Woods, and he owns this small video station, this broadcasting company that puts on like weird, creepy like movies and horror films and things. And he picks up like this broadcast of a snuff film, and he's trying to find out where it comes from. And in David Cronenberg fashion, there's lots of like body mutilation with like very big sexual overtones. The camera's about to switch over to a new clip. I hope it did. So anyway, there's lots of like sexual overtones and weird body mutilation. He starts dating Debbie Harry from Blondie, and she gets involved, and they're trying to track down where this snuff film broadcast is coming from, and then they get wrapped up into it. It's really weird. You don't know what's real and what isn't. A lot of cool futuristic for the time type references and symbolism of like the way the future could be, sort of with, you know, the way people like addicted to television or addicted to the internet type of stuff. There was no internet back then, but if you haven't seen Videodrome and you like science fiction and like weirdness, check it out. So those are some of my favorite films, guys. Let me know if you've seen any of them, and thank you to Heath and Travis for kind of piquing this and making me want to do this. Let me know if you do watch any of these, what you think. Thank you guys for watching. It's Vampire Mike from Sega CD Universe. Be good.